What's up, everyone? Happy GAC Lock Day. We're getting ready to kick off I think it's season 20, 3v3 here. And yeah, really just kind of looking to, this is almost more of a check-in. There isn't really too much new stuff here, but I think there's also some very important stuff here, as well as just a couple of takes I have on the current meta and how I see things going. And I think a lot of this will actually differ from the usual that you've heard lately. So yeah, I guess if you haven't seen me talk about 3v3 before, for pretty much the past couple of 3v3 seasons, I've put a lot of work into trying to refine and build a trickier extra defense that really just kind of tech the meta in some really nice ways, was much harder for your opponent to beat. And honestly, again, I guess a little bit of backstory. It's been about 2.5 seasons since I started doing this now, and only 2 people were able to full clear me. This is counting people from top guilds. This is counting streamers from top guilds. This defense is generally just a massive pain. And I was able to find a couple of ways to start cracking it, because this has been delivering some really stupid free wins a lot of the time. And I was also just kind of sick of it. So yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. We do have some of the old classics like Fast Malak DR here, but the winds of change have been coming for a while, and whether you know it or not, hopefully you will by the end of this video, things are starting to get kind of weird again, and I don't really know where I land on a lot of this stuff. I think at the very least going into week 1, I'm very much just feeling kind of a wait and see, test the waters, but we're going to go down team by team and kind of just explain where I see most of these teams landing at least compared to where they used to be. So first team kicking off here, we have, you can see, Rey separate from Commander Tano. I know a lot of people have been talking about Rey plus Cat, a lot of, interest or concern, or, I understand why people think those two characters would belong together here. But actually, I think I disagree. So this past 3v3 season, I already started to experiment with Hermit Yoda as kind of a Commander Tano light before she came to the game. And I actually think I prefer Hermit Yoda more to her now. Specifically, you need to have the second Zeta, the one that allows him to recast Master's Training after the person with it dies, just in case he gives it to, in this case, Armorer first. We'll get to her in a second. But yeah, really the goal of this here is you would want to give Rey a really good amount of offense base. Obviously, Hermit Yoda only gives her 25%, Commander Tano gives her 50%, but the key difference here is Master's Training lasts after Hermit Yoda's death. Technically, Commander Tano's unique is kind of lasting after death in some spots anyway, but we don't build around bugs, we need to build around how the game actually works. Hopefully that will be fixed sooner than later, and it's not consistent anyway. We want our team to always be good, right? Right. So there's already plenty of teams that start to break that gambit. I don't have the mods currently equipped, but essentially what I'm aiming for is, I hate giving hard number targets like this, but I mean, I would say if you have a Relegate Rey, try to at least get to like, at very minimum, I would say 12,000 offense. I try to lock in. I tend to just go all out on offense and end up sacrificing a lot of health and speed. But in the last season that I ran, I was running a 12.9 K offense Rey, pretty much roughly barely in range of the 13,000 offense mark. And so if you think about it, with the 25% offense, she is kind of scratching on that 15.5, 16,000 offense mark, which, if you think about the numbers for what a lot of Rey with Commander Tanos are going to be running, getting that 50% offense, you essentially have roughly the same offense that a lot of these matchups that you've been seeing are testing with for permanent duration, instead of just having to work with hoping Commander Tano stays alive. There are plenty of teams that people have been finding that can break Commander Tano before that happens, right? This is a different kind of mix-up altogether, and the solutions do not come easily, which is why I think I land so firmly, and I believe Hermit Yoda is just the better option here. Now, let's talk about armor, because this does lead to a weird consideration. This is essentially a second mix-up, one that's been floating around the GAC meta for a while now. I only just got my armor in this last 5v5 season, so I never really got to mess with it. And I'm not actually sure if I like these two together yet, but essentially, so what Armorer does here, right, is Armorer says that if you want to run something like a Eternal Emperor, right, and it's a very passive opener, you're not really actively killing Armorer you do not get to kill Rey easily, if at all, right? Armor will at least have the 50% chance of giving Beskar to Rey, which means Rey will get the bonus health, the bonus defense, the crit immunity, the counterattacks. I mean, Rey counterattacks they don't lifesteal or anything, but it's still free damage, right? This is essentially saying that if the fight draws out, if you are not trying to kill me proactively, this deal will only get worse for you over time. And I really like that dynamic. You don't usually see armor with Herman Yoda like this. Usually, I'm a little bit nervous to not bring a pre-taunt here. I mean, you know, if they were going for something like a Thrawn strat, usually that comes with like a JKR mark alongside it. So maybe no tank here doesn't actually matter much, but that is kind of my main concern right now. Just something to keep in mind. But this is what I will be trying week 1. You know, a pretty solidly fast armor. You know, if you really want to min-max against Eternal Emperor, you cut down their protection modding as much as possible. Rey already has pretty bad base protection, but, you know, armor, we don't necessarily need to feed her extra protection, right? I would just say give her health. It'll be fine. And then, yeah, you could even go so far as to try to make sure that Herman Yoda has higher health and protection combined than armor does, which means that armor will get lifeblood, and that will just make killing armor off even trickier, which is not a bad trick, right? So yeah, that's my current feeling on Rey. I really love high offense Rey. It has put people under some insane pressure in 3v3, and Herman Yoda was really just the amazing icing on the cake with that. And I really don't feel like Commander Tano adds much of anything here, right? Most of the time, I expect that people will just default to mirroring my Rey, which in that case, I would rather not waste Commander Tano anyway, because my current feeling on Commander Tano, she ended up being very, very strange to plan out for in 3v3. I don't think I see her working on defense. It pains me to say this because I love taking new power characters and shoving them on defense in the most painful spot possible. But almost angle that I've thought of so far really doesn't feel like Commander Tano has a place. You know, if you think of putting Master Kenobi on defense with Commander Tano, that is the easiest Supreme Leader Kylo with Daka Zombie matchup that I think I've ever heard of. Right, if you put in GK, then they lack a Dispel, they don't have Ahsoka. If you put in Ahsoka, then you don't have a taunt and you can just stun Commander Tano. The team just breaks to so many cheap trade downs that it really just feels like a tragic waste. So I think just in general, I see myself holding Master Kenobi and Commander Tano a lot, right? I have heard pretty good things about Commander Tano Kenobi like 2v5s and 5v5, so I could only assume that 3v3 that should continue to be a good trend as well. And yeah, would really like to just see how this team does as either a 2-pair trying to like, you know, maybe 2-shot undersized GLs or split them apart. I have this Padme team kind of seemed like the best non-GL way to try to make use of Commander Tano. It's not my favorite by any means here. But essentially what we have here is a way to try to sneak in some decent Xian value. Like you could never, I guess you could try posting this on defense, but I think it'll still fall to the same usual Padme answers. Plus it's a 50% chance that Commander Tano's AI will just give Xian to Padme, which does nothing, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't necessarily think you look at this Padme Cat team and say, you know, oh, this is amazing. But I think if you're driving this on offense, it might be able to punch up in some interesting ways. I don't think you would, like, I don't see this being able to successfully gun down Supreme Leader Kylo, but, you know, it's a little bit untested here. But this, at least to me, strikes as a pretty decent option for holding stuff for offense, right? Right. So, this is where things start to get a little bit crazy. We have, I would say, the tried and true longtime king of 3v3, Darth Revan with a fast Malak. This team has been stupidly overpowered for so long. It has been a massive advantage to be running it yourself and fighting an opponent who does not run or post it. It is just insanely good. Now, in case you missed it, I dropped this kind of towards the end of the last 3v3 season. It went a little bit under the radar. Troopers can cleanly counter fast Malak. This is still less of a preferable option than using Vader in 3v3 as the default DR counter, but Vader can't necessarily handle fast Malak, right? Troopers can, and this is where things have gotten pretty insane to me because this team used to be in auto win condition, and now I would say the auto win, you know, if you happen to be fighting another fast Malak owner, you knew about Troopers and had your stuff prepared. They did not. I would say the auto win condition starts to become that, right? Because suddenly you're trading troopers for what is effectively a GL, and they were not. And yeah, it's a massive advantage to have. I'll put the link to that video down in the description. You can check it out. It's very exciting stuff. Veer's modding is a little bit annoying to hit, but it has led to some very, very interesting chain effects here that I think we'll start to get to in a minute. So, General Skywalker on defense, I think when 3v3 kind of first started, understandably, right? People tried to mess around with gas, and gas on 3v3 just loses a lot, unfortunately. All right, there's less people there when he's sitting down. He gets less protection in defense because there's less 501st. It's just less than ideal, right? But the thing that has stood out to me the most is, even though gas is worse, he's still a pretty good team. He's actually a massive pain to deal with cleanly, in spite of everything else. So gas on defense is something that I've been using a lot the last season and a half, I want to say. It's been working extremely well for me. And we have created, at least for players who know kind of what's going on, we have created kind of a 2-for-1 trap scenario. This gets a little bit convoluted really quickly here, right? So let's say the cheapest way to counter gas right now is using Han and Chewie. So what I'd like to do a lot this past season is we would take the Fin Bro team, which I think a lot of people have stopped posting on defense just because a lot of people know the default reaction that everyone does is, oh, you just trade Han Chewie for cheap and that team just kills over and dies, which is true. But I actually started posting the team because that was my intended effect, is I wanted to bait out the Han and Chewie. So you hit them with the front wall bros, you hit them with the back wall gas. If, they're a kind of standard player, then they will feel kind of screwed, or like they might have to gas mirror or use a GL. The nice thing about gas on 3v3 defense is he does not really trade down. So there's that to start. Now, a lot of you, I think, would correctly be thinking, well, but Fatal, troopers counter Fin Bros pretty easily. And that is, I think, one of the responses that a lot of people have started to pick up, because I think a lot of people know about this typical bait, right? You see front wall bros, especially like if you're posting gas a ton in your history, they see the front wall bros. That's a thing that you would easily suspect. This is where things start to get a little bit convoluted. So we have these two teams kind of floating around each other, right? We have Han and Chewie, and we have troopers. Now, currently right now with the CLS style that I have been sitting on for ages, and it seems like has picked up decently in popularity, we do have this sort of targeted modding to make counters like JTR much more difficult, using tenacity, crit avoidance, heavy protection stacking, really, and also a lot of extra speed, really just making this team more difficult to control and keep down, keep it more responsive, and just try to make JTR's life a living hell to even kill them successfully, regardless of whether or not they get control successfully on someone or not. And yeah, really just been a promising setup so far. Hasn't held every time against JTR, but most of the time, and enough that it has made some people who always use JTR prefer other options. One of those new options able to kill CS has been troopers, that I think a lot of people have started to want to default to using Dark Trooper to just try to knock CLS's lights out. And to some degree, that is actually kind of a concern for why I'm considering pushing CLS to at least trying to adopt like a fast protection arrow, if possible. Like easier said than done. Like, I myself don't really have a good option for this slot here. Like this is the best that I'm looking at, and yeah, right. It's nothing too amazing compared to like, I have target farmed some crit avoid arrows, but Dark Trooper is blind to crit avoidance, right? If we mod for crit avoidance, he's not going to crit us anyway. We effectively just have a easier to kill CLS instead of if we had that protection primary. So where does that leave us? Well, depending on if troopers start to get adopted as much or not, then we end up in this interesting situation where you could do something like a front wall bros CLS and a back wall gas DR, plus maybe some varying orders of other baits. But you have this sort of situation where you're kind of tempting out both of these teams that you really want to pull, and you have some pretty nice punishments otherwise. Or you could even post, DR front wall alongside bros and CLS, which is actually what ended up being one of my fairly common front walls last season, and I found worked pretty well. But this was also before I even knew that troopers could beat DR, right? Which only makes this situation even weirder. So either you hide the DR to try to get troopers out before, and then you have this pseudo galactic legend power team in 3v3 sitting back wall, and suddenly they just don't have the easy counter. Or you try to trade down troopers immediately, and then you potentially try to force them to use something harder to kill CLS. The other elephant in the room for CLS right now is Bad Batch. Absolutely can just eat CLS horrifically. The only real saving grace there, I guess, would be if you can try to get your team faster, which is easier said than done. Bad Batch Echo is a stupidly fast unit. And yeah, that is ultimately going to be a losing battle on speed. But, you know, we're in a weird spot right now. It's hard to say where people's average Echo speed is going to land. And I did mess around with trying to make the CLS more extreme last season. I just feed them more speed than I was used to feeding them. We're talking like 320s-ish on CLS and C-3PO. It's a pretty solid results overall, to be honest. But yeah, again, this is a team that's very much in flux right now, and it is starting to gain a lot of natural predators. I think this team could be on the downtrend, or at least may need to try to reinvent the wheel and come up with something new. But for now, I'm still sticking with it. I want to see it start to take some damage first, and then reconsider. Speaking of speed issues and being on the downtrend, this Jedi Knight Luke team, I think is very much in a position right now where you either need to double down and full commit that you believe in this team, or potentially consider ditching it. All that's really happening right here with this team is it is your Shaak Ti versus their Gideon. And Gideon has an 11 speed advantage on base speed. So essentially what you are doing is, if you want this team to continue to work, you need to over-invest speed on Shaak Ti to the point that you are trying to overspend their Gideon speed investment. That is easier said than done. Like for me, I will be locking in my Shaak Ti at about 364 speed, at least trying to get a little bit of a comfortable, you know, overhead over, let's say like a 360 Gideon average. But again, if you start to see, you know, a 370 Gideon is not that weird to see these days, right? In fact, to me, it's kind of standard. And so this team can very much go the way of the Dino. Now, just because they have the Gideon that fast doesn't mean they necessarily know how to use it or abuse it, but it does immediately create a cause for concern, as well as there's also, I guess, coincidentally, it's sitting right below him. Darth Treya, lead, has some very nice positioning against Jedi Knight Luke, lead. I have had some people try and fail, but I do still believe that Treya Triumvirate can take on JKL teams to pretty solid comfort. And that is, in my opinion, especially for the characters we're putting in and the mod investment, is a pretty significant trade down for that team that I wouldn't necessarily want to take posting them on defense. So that's kind of the issue that I see right now, is we have certain teams that have been absolutely insane in past seasons. It feels like I personally can see the cracks starting to show on some of these teams. Like, you can see how they would be exploitable, but it's hard to say how, you know, how much your opponents will know to exploit them. Like, this is even, you know, assuming that they have the correct speeds to be able to exploit them at the time of their 3v3 lock-in. So, I mean, you can kind of see things are feeling kind of uncertain for me right now. I feel very much just like it's time to start experimenting again and find some new angles. I am still going to be sticking with this relative, you know, setup that we've been running for a few seasons now and I want to see the cracks start to show in game firsthand first, right? Because it's easy to see the flaws in your own defense, but it's a different story to see how other people react to your defense and whether they see the flaws as well. The moment I start to see people picking up on how to beat it, I definitely think it will be time to change. But yeah, for now, I mean, I still feel pretty good about how these setups have done in the past. It is an insane track record they have put up. And until the time comes where it's time to put it to bed, you know, the moment that time comes, I will absolutely be doing it. But I still really love high offense Rey plus Hermit Yoda, as well as what a lot of these other teams have been doing. And we'll see how the adoption rate comes, because pretty much all of these teams that have been the linchpins in past seasons could easily be going the way of the Dino. Fast Malak, Darth, Revan should be going out. TLS should be going out. JKL should be going out. And at that point in time, it will mean that it is time to try to find a way to build a harder defense for 3v3 that might have to lean towards, posting more, right? We've been posting half cheese defense alongside these setups for so long. And I think that's partially, as a credit or due to how stupid these comps have been and kind of how unfair they are to unprepared opponents. But I think it's high time that we need to, build some more, I would call, fully legitimate strategies, right? Ignorance can only be a game plan for so long. And I'm glad that hopefully people are starting to get the right idea. So that'll be for me going into the start of this season. I will, if there's anything I think worth saying, or, depending on how things are going, I do feel pretty strongly about this team, but I do want to see if armor leaves this team a little best too exposed. A Thrawn fracture at the start could always screw things up. This is a very Rey-centric team. And we do, have Beskar going on Rey, hopefully, Master Training going on Rey, hopefully, as well as like an Equalize for if Rey takes a lot of heat. But it is still a very passive team versus if we had just gone Rey plus Hermidita plus either a tank or Vandor I've been using last season. This is very much just a time will tell thing. But this is kind of where my head is at going into this season. All right, that'll be it for me. Good luck out there in your first week. Happy hunting.